Five, four, three, two, one. Hello, 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 and welcome. Welcome back to Space Engineers on the Xbox Series X. And this is just a very quick look at this ship. This is probably the cheapest large grid you could build in survival using everything I've shown you over the past year to get you to space and back on a budget. Taking a look at it, what is it? Well, it starts off with a large landing gear. The large landing gear is then attached to a large tank here, or a hydrogen tank. Let me just pop open the build menu and I'll show you. There's your oxygen tank, there's your hydro tank, and there's your small hydro tanks. So these things are really the basis, excuse me, frog in the throat, of this build. They will support this large hydrogen thruster here, and then all you need are 1, 2, 3, 4 hydrogen thrusters attached to each port at the back of the large hydrogen tank. Then at the top middle port, you want this curved conveyor tube to a hydrogen thruster. That is all the thrust that you will need. So 1 large, 4 hydrogen thrusters, and a reverse thruster at the top attached to the tube. From this large landing gear, we have 2 batteries, one either side, attached to the left and right ports of the tank. That will give us enough power for 6 hours of operation of this ship. This ship's purpose is to get us to space and let us have a poke around the asteroids. It is not a cargo hauler, although it does have, moving swiftly on, 2 hydrogen generators. And you'll notice the skin it's using is, just a moment, the Pertum sandy, dusty skin that I'm quite fond of. This is a rebuild of my original rocket that I actually used in my tests. I hadn't bothered to recolor it, so there we go. But yeah, as we move around, you'll see there's 2 batteries, as I said, and the most important thing here, we've got cargo containers and so on. So let's move around. 2 important parts, 2 O2H2s. These generators will provide you with enough oxygen and hydrogen to sustain your fuel. Then we've got 2 small cargo containers which you can put resources in. Just don't overload this ship. Then 2 spotlights for when it gets dark. And then moving at the front port of these O2 generators, we have a conveyor block. This conveyor block is because we are using an industrial cockpit. The industrial cockpit is then linked via 2 curved conveyor tubes back into the conveyor here. And then just for identification purposes, we have a beacon rather than antennas, because a large antenna would stick up quite far. And last but not least, we have a regular gyroscope with just default settings, nothing changed at all. So that's the basics of the components. One large landing gear, one large hydrogen tank, 2 batteries, 4 thrusters, one large curved conveyor, thruster, and so on. Then moving at the front, you put in the 2 hydrogen generators, then the conveyor, then the cockpit, then link these 2 in, drop a beacon on top, but before you do that, you can drop a couple of solar panels either side. You can use these cargo boxes here to anchor the panels. You can drop a couple of spotlights underneath here. And then you have a basic large grid ship which will get you to space and back and allow you to take small amounts of materials up into space to establish a headquarters out there. And this flies fairly well. You could, if you wanted, slap a large grid or detector on here somewhere, potentially underneath, just sticking out there. Allow you to prospect for ores. This is a fairly simple build, and as I said, you can drop your ice in here. It'll get pulled through into the system by any active generators, or it'll just sit there quite happily in the cargo container waiting to be used. You'll see this one has got some ice in already. The hydrogen tank is full. And just to give you an idea of how this performs, we're going to look in the cockpit. But first of all, I'll give you a rundown of what we have set as shortcuts. First things first, you're going to need a few groups. Just a couple. Your hydro thrusters will be your first group. And as you know how to group things by now, or if you don't, as I always do, the quick refresher is use the D-pad to scroll up and down on your menu, and the left stick to move between windows. Then left and right on the D-pad will alter sliders. You do not want to push right on the D-pad because you can set the thrust override by accident. So what we want here is to click the right bumper down because we've already got hydrogen thrusters selected, and just tap A on the ones that we want. Click this, then keep the right bumper down, tap down on the D-pad, and then tap A on the large hydrogen thruster. So you want all of those thrusters set as a group. You can see what I've done there. So push right twice and then up once on the left stick, go to block group, type a name in, save it off. I called them hydro thrust, and it'll appear at the top of the list. When you press A on it, it will light up all the parts here. And what I'll do is I'll just briefly run down the actual parts on this ship in the control panel. Nothing's been hidden. So there's 2 batteries, 1 beacon, 1 gyroscope, 1 large hydrogen tank, these thrusters here, 1 cockpit, 1 large landing gear, 1 very large hydrogen thruster at the back, 2 generators, 2 small cargo containers, 2 solar panels, and 2 spotlights. And that's all you need to put this ship together to get you out away from gravity and into space. And as I said, this ship will operate for about 6 hours because it's not doing anything strenuous. It's not mining, it's not doing anything like that. It's just doing its job, which is to get you out there. So your other group is simply a cosmetic thing. It's your lights. So same deal, find your lights, group them up, save them off, and pop them there. Then on your actual D-pad, you'll see I have the landing gear set. And if you remember how to do that, you hold down the direction you want on the D-pad, keep it held down until the toolbar config menu pops up. Then choose the block you want, which in this case is landing gear 2, press A on it, and then change that to switch lock. What you might want to do as well is go into your control panel, go to your landing gear, and just turn that auto lock off, so it doesn't automatically lock the landing gear whenever you touch down anywhere. Controlling the landing gear with the D-pad is a lot better. Also, do not use the Y button to turn the landing gear on and off. It's a habit to get out of. The same with connectors. You'll notice we don't have a connector on this ship because we're going to rely on charging the ship in sunlight with the solar panels. So, moving around then, going clockwise to the top, our thrusters, hydro thrust, up here in groups, set to on off. And then we want the reverse thruster, which we can name. It will be called backward on the menu in the control panel. And I like to call these hydrogen thruster reverse or hydrogen thruster rev, as I've done here, so I know. And that one you want to toggle on off as well. Then your spotlight, under your groups, same thing, toggle on off. And last but not least, hold down the left stick, press B, and move to the second window. Here, you want to look at your large thruster. It's the only one on the ship. You want to push on the D-pad left first, and you want to see what I've set here by going to all blocks, going to the large hydrogen thruster, and increasing the thrust override. And on the opposite side, do the same, but decrease the thrust override. And that is the simplest setup you can get with this. So if we turn on the thrusters and just pop out, you'll see that all the thrusters are on and we're burning fuel. But because we're making more fuel than we're using, the hydrogen tank stays full as long as there's ice on the ship. Remember, you're producing oxygen for the cockpit and fuel for the thrusters. Your batteries are being charged by solar panels. If you felt like it, potentially you could replace that beacon there and slap a hydrogen engine on top for battery charge purposes. You'd need to therefore turn that into a conveyor block rather than a curved conveyor, a conveyor junction into the engine, so the whole thing fed into your ice storage. But that would mean you would be eating ice from the actual hydrogen fuel system. It's up to you. There are ways to get around things like that, but this is the basics of a ship to get you out there and just to prove that it is actually using fuel. Because even though I'm in creative now obeys a lot of the rules of survival. You'll see that we have a hydrogen tank here, and the hydrogen tank at the moment is full. If I do this and turn off our generators, it's not being used yet, but when I start this ship flying, it will start to drain the hydrogen fuel. What we can do is, you'll hear that lovely roar of the thrusters. If I disengage the landing gear and then tap A, you'll see that the ship is not very heavy. And because I have 2 batteries on it now, we've actually got 23 days of power at the moment. It's 6 hours with 1 battery on the old build. And the idea with this one really is to get up at this point, turn off your reverse thruster, and tilt the nose up. You'll notice that as I tilt the nose up, we're not losing any height because this large hydrogen thruster at the back is providing enough lift to lift this 79,730 kilogram ship. And the reason that we put thrust override on is so that we can sit back, tap left on the D-pad, and push our thrust to max, and then tap right on the D-pad a couple of times just to bring it down below Space Engineer's speed limit and give us a more fuel efficient takeoff. We're not fighting against our reverse thruster because we've turned that off, and so the ship is off into the sky. Adjust your ship a bit, and then if we go back into the control panel and take a look at that hydrogen tank, you can see we're going through hydrogen. We're on 98.4% and it's dropping. So watch when we enable the 2 generators. Now when we pop back and look at the hydrogen tank, we're now on 98.5%. Our fuel is starting to replenish. When that hits 100, we won't be using any of that hydrogen in the tank whatsoever. We are fully fuel sufficient, and as long as there's some ice in this system, this ship will get you to space and back without a problem. It may not be the prettiest ship on the block, it may not be the nicest looking thing, but I've used these several times just to get me out there to establish an asteroid base. They can be useful for hauling small amounts of materials backwards and forwards. You know, make your equipment that you need or your components you need to build your infrastructure out there amongst the stars. Then use this ship to get you out there past the grav well and so on. Extremely efficient design, and I stumbled on it after testing several versions for my rocket tests that I did as the mod showcase for Flare EK's Pulse and Torch drive. I wanted to use a couple of rockets to do that, and this is the build. I remember Paul Thompson popping along and saying how much he liked it, so hopefully Paul likes the iteration of the old rocket to this new one that can be used as a ship. That's half the fun of this game, is iterating on original designs that you had and playing around with it. I'm sure that somebody could take this and make it even more efficient or add bits and pieces. Like I said, you could drop an ore detector on this thing. But if I cut the engines at this point, it will start to drop back down. But if I brought the engines to idle mode, it would just hang at 20,000 meters and not fall. So there it is. The rather ugly duckling of a hydro rocket. But it's a good way of teaching the basics of spaceflight in Space Engineers, keeping a ship light compared to some of the builds. If you've seen my Callisto 71, then it's pretty hefty in terms of weight and design. Now we're out in space, you can see we're on 6 hours with 2 batteries, and that's still more than enough. You can see the first few asteroids as we reach 26,000 meters. We'll break gravity at above about 41, if I remember off the top of my head. And at around the 20, I think it's either 21 or 25,000 meter mark, ion thrusters become active. So if you've got a dual hydro and ion build, you can actually turn your hydros off at that point and just power on with the ions to conserve fuel. But with this kind of ship, you don't need to worry about conserving fuel that much, because if I open up our control panel again and go to the hydrogen tank, you'll see that it's using fuel and then replenishing it straight away. Eventually, when we run out of ice, that fuel is going to start to tick down. But out here in space, there is a good chance that you can stumble on an ice asteroid. If you stumble on an ice asteroid, it's worth building a little fuel station nearby or even on it and creating your infrastructure in space around that. I will potentially be building one of these in my survival series from scratch, which will give you more of an idea of how they're built using, proper survival rules and so on. But I thought it might be nice, like I did with the drills, to give a sneak peek of this particular ship. You could, in theory, use this particular ship as well if you've got a really good source of ice. As a prospector ship, like I said, slap a large Ordis thing and just scoot it low over the planet's surface carefully, and you should pick up a bunch of ores. I mean, normally I like to build my atmospheric thrust variant scout that I showed off in the last video, just for poking around. Here we go. We're almost out of gravity. Still nearly there. And there we go. We are officially in space. We cut that now, and we actually turn off our thrusters completely. And we're now under full control. Bring the ship to a stop by turning back our reverse thruster, turning it back on. Don't want to go too close to that rust freighter because we are not armed. But there it is. We're in space. Explore. See, I've got my space headquarters over there. See, we have an asteroid coming up here. If we just have a brief look. Let's get back to the cockpit view. You see, this thing actually speeds up and slows down quite nicely. Half the fun of this game is the space exploration and just finding out what's out there. It's not a very maneuverable craft either, so don't expect it to be doing stopping and turning. Well, it'll turn on a dime, but it's not a fighter. Have our lights as well, which we can turn up the intensity on and so on. Pop out. And there's a reason that we have a little beacon on there so we can see where the ship is. And there we are. In space. Ready to utilise any ores and so on that we can find. Maybe even stumble on some uranium. Start looking at platinum and so on. There it is. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one. I will be back again fairly soon, and I'll be looking at my survival save. So we'll be building that atmospheric vehicle to go looking for better quality materials to eventually build us one of these and get beyond the Earth-like on that save and see what's out there and establish maybe a little asteroid base for exploring the unknown. Until then, stay safe, take care, have fun, enjoy the game. Reach out on my community tab if you have any questions. Same as the comments. Leave a comment if you have any questions. Join our Facebook group. Pop along to the Discord. I'll leave the relevant links in the description of this video, although you can look into the community tab and they will be there. Bye for now.